Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today, we are going to be looking at something really interesting. It's this kind of like collision of fashion and politics and social media.
Oh, yeah.
And all of this is coming from this super interesting article that we found about reactions to the outfits that people were wearing at Donald Trump's presidential inauguration.
Yeah. Inaugurations are always like really interesting places to look at fashion.
Yeah.
You've got this mix of like, politicians and celebrities and regular people all in one place, and like what they decide to wear becomes this like statement.
Totally. It's subtle sometimes, and sometimes it's not so subtle.
Right.
But there were definitely some outfits at this particular inauguration that had people talking.
For sure.
Like take Lauren Sanchez, for example. She's engaged to Jeff Bezos, right? And she showed up in this like white Alexander McQueen suit. But what really got people's attention was that underneath she was wearing this like matching white lace bra.
Yeah, I think that's a really great example of how what's appropriate to wear can be so subjective, especially at something like an inauguration. What one person thinks is totally fine, someone else could think is like completely out of line.
Yeah. It's kind of like a fashion Rorschach test almost.
Totally.
Everyone's bringing their own like personal baggage and interpretations.
Right.
And speaking of strong opinions, we can't forget about Christine Quinn. She's the reality TV star from that show Selling Sunset.
Oh, yeah.
And she had some thoughts about Sanchez's outfit.
She did. She basically said that the outfit looked like something you'd see on her show Selling Sunset, which, that show is known for a certain kind of fashion, a little more daring.
Yeah, I mean, I think her comment really like hit a nerve with a lot of people because it kind of speaks to this like unspoken anxiety we have around women and power and how they express themselves through clothing.
For sure. And, especially in politics, women's outfits are always under a microscope way more than men's outfits are.
Right. It's not just about the outfit itself. It's like what people think it means.
Exactly. And Christine Quinn, she's really good at like tapping into that cultural anxiety and getting people talking.
She's a pro.
Yeah, she knows what she's doing.
And social media just like exploded with reactions to Sanchez's outfit.
Oh, of course.
Some people thought it was way too much for the inauguration.
Right.
Others were like, she can wear what she wants.
Yeah, and that's the thing about social media. It just like throws fuel on the fire of any fashion debate.
It's like now everyone's a fashion critic.
Totally. And the stakes are so much higher because literally anyone can see your opinion.
Right. So we've got Lauren Sanchez out stirring things up. But that's not all. Remember Ivanka Trump and that Oscar de la Renta gown?
Oh, right. And that's where we start getting into this whole cancel culture thing.
Yeah.
People were calling for a boycott of Oscar de la Renta because they didn't like Ivanka Trump's politics.
It's kind of crazy to think about. So now it's not just individuals that are under scrutiny for their fashion choices. It's the designers too.
Right.
Like, how do designers even deal with that?
It's a tough spot to be in.
Do they just stick to their vision and dress whoever wants to wear their stuff?
Right. Or are they super careful about who they dress and maybe alienate some customers?
Yeah, it's a tough one. And it seems like that's a debate that's happening more and more in fashion these days.
Definitely.
Okay, so we've talked about Sanchez and Ivanka Trump, but let's switch gears for a sec and talk about Melania Trump's outfit.
Okay.
Now, hers wasn't really controversial from like a political standpoint,
Right.
but it still like caught the internet's attention.
Yeah.
She wore this navy blue silk and wool coat and had this big wide-brimmed hat. It was designed by like an up-and-coming designer.
Oh, interesting.
And of course, the internet did what it does best, turn it into a meme.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of funny how even at something as serious as an inauguration, fashion can become this like source of humor.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think it's also a good reminder that fashion isn't always about sending a specific message or making a grand statement.
Right.
Sometimes it's just about personal expression.
Right.
And the way people react to that expression can be totally different.
So even when it's not intentional, fashion can still get people talking and reveal cultural anxieties and become a meme.
Exactly.
It's pretty powerful.
It is. And when you think about how closely fashion is connected to politics and social media, it becomes even more interesting.
Yeah. So we've got people disagreeing on what's appropriate to wear, social media blowing up every fashion opinion.
Yeah.
And brands caught in the middle of it all.
It's a lot to keep up with.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's a really fascinating and complicated world.
It is. And as we go deeper into this topic, I think it's really important to think about why these issues matter so much to us.
Yeah.
Like, why do we care so much about what people wear, especially when it comes to politics?
That is a really good question.
Yeah.
And I think that question gets to the heart of how we see power and identity and social norms in the world today.
Yeah.
But before we get too deep into all of that, let's take a quick break. We'll be back in a minute with more insights from the inauguration's fashion frenzy. So we were talking about this whole cancel culture thing and how it's playing out in fashion.
Yeah, like with the whole Oscar de la Renta situation with Ivanka Trump.
Right. People were saying boycott Oscar de la Renta because they didn't agree with her politics.
Exactly. And it's tricky because on the one hand, consumers should be able to support brands that align with their values. But then again, is it really fair to punish a designer for what someone else does or believes?
Yeah, it's tough. Like, where do you draw the line?
Right. And boycotts have been around forever, but social media has just like supercharged them.
Totally. It's like one tweet and suddenly a brand is in a total crisis.
It's wild. Think about it. Back in the day, a designer might dress a controversial figure and it might get a little bit of attention in the fashion world. But now it's like instant global backlash.
Yeah, it's like designers can't just think about making beautiful clothes anymore. They have to think about all these potential social and political landmines.
Exactly. It's like every design choice has all these ripple effects that you can't even predict.
So it's not just about aesthetics anymore. It's like ethics and social responsibility and trying to guess how people are going to react on social media.
It's a lot.
It really is.
Yeah.
But it brings us back to this idea that fashion is a language.
Yes.
And like with any language, there are all these subtle messages and layers of meaning.
Totally.
So we've got to be like more fluent in fashion.
I like that.
We have to be able to understand what those messages are saying.
Yeah.
And think about the impact of what we choose to wear.
It's about being more aware and thinking critically about fashion.
Right. Not just following trends or wearing what looks good, but understanding the deeper meaning behind it all.
Exactly. It's like reading between the seams.
I love that. Trying to understand the culture and the designer's intentions and the wearer's personal style.
Right. Like fashion is this big puzzle,
Yeah.
and each outfit is a clue.
Okay. So we've talked about the controversies and the boycotts and the whole idea of fashion as a language. But let's get back to something you mentioned earlier. Why do we even care so much about what people wear?
Yeah, it's a good question, especially in the context of politics.
Right. Like, why is everyone so obsessed with what politicians wear?
I think it comes down to this basic human need to categorize things and make sense of the world around us.
Okay.
And clothes are like this really visible way that we show our identity and who we belong with.
So when we see a politician wearing a certain outfit, we're not just looking at the clothes. We're trying to figure out what it says about them as a person.
Exactly. And because politicians have power, their clothes become even more important. We're looking for clues about their character and if they can represent us.
So it's like we're looking for proof that they share our values.
Right. And when they don't, it can be really jarring.
So fashion in politics is about way more than just clothes.
It's about power and perception and how we judge people based on what we see.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
It really is.
Yeah, it's like we're all obsessed with figuring out the secret code of what their clothes mean.
Totally. And even a simple outfit can have like a ton of different meanings. Like, remember Melania Trump's outfit? The one that became a meme?
Yeah.
Well, some fashion experts thought it was her way of like separating herself from the style of other first ladies.
Huh. So it's like every little detail matters.
Exactly. It's not just about throwing on a dress. They're really thinking about the image they're projecting.
Right. Because that image can really affect how people see them.
Yeah.
Especially in politics. Like, think about some of those iconic fashion moments. Jackie Kennedy's hat, Nelson Mandela's shirts.
Oh, yeah.
It's like fashion became a way for them to communicate without even speaking.
Totally. And these days, with everything being so visual, that kind of nonverbal communication is even more important.
Okay, so we've got to ask ourselves, where do we go from here? Every outfit can end up online and get analyzed. So how do we balance expressing ourselves with all of this scrutiny?
That's the big question, right? I don't think there's an easy answer, but I think it's important to at least be aware of what our clothes might be saying, even if we don't mean to say anything.
So it's not about like censoring ourselves or following a bunch of rules. It's about knowing the situation and who you're with and how your choices might affect things.
Exactly. And that's a conversation that we need to keep having because fashion is always changing and it's always going to be mixed up with politics and social media and our everyday lives.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from what's appropriate to wear to social media and how fashion and public image are all connected.
It's been really interesting to see how clothes can become symbols and start arguments and show us what you're really worried about when it comes to power and identity.
It's definitely given me a lot to think about.
Me too.
And I hope it's made you think too, listener. The next time you see someone dressed up, think about what their clothes might be saying. You might be surprised by what you notice. Until next time, stay curious.